React.js is one of the most commonly picked frameworks when building web apps today. But if you're a founder or a decision maker, especially in early stage tech, following that trend could quietly sabotage your product. React isn't just slow, it's a bloated ecosystem with technical debt baked into its DNA. Yet despite this, it keeps being chosen. Why? Oh boy, this is going to be a fun one, isn't it? I always love breaking down these React sucks articles because usually they have some good points within them, and I try to find those because I've went throughout my career from being the backend guy who hated front end to the React guy who hated other languages and frameworks to the Svelte guy that people thought would never use React again, to the Solid supporter, to the Astro guy, to the Next.js guy, to whatever the hell I am now. I've been through it with my relationship with React, and I wish people who hated it would acknowledge what it's good at, but usually they fail to do it. This will be an interesting one, in particular, the focus on tech founders and entrepreneurs, because even if you disagree with my takes on shipping at scale, I would hope you understand that I'm good enough at the tech entrepreneur and founder side at this point. I've successfully spun up businesses myself. I have been helping many others go from 2 employees to millions of dollars a year in revenue. I know this part particularly well. So my thoughts on this and how React plays into the role of a scalable business, I don't think it's that disputable. That said, this article is looking like it's going to cause me some psychic damage. So we're going to do a quick break for today's sponsor, and then we'll dive in to the utter chaos that's going to be this article. If you're a vibe coder working on small projects, you can skip this part. But if you're working on real production applications with lots of other developers, pay close attention because Augment code is one of the best received things that we've ever covered on this channel. Fun fact, my personal assistant gets annoyed when I do an Augment ad because every time I do, I have so many people hit me up after saying, oh my God, I didn't know AI code could be this good. Because these are people who are working on giant code bases, and Augment cracked the code to figure out how to make those work well. I seriously don't know what they did, but there's a reason that they're winning all of these benchmarks. There's a reason that if you scroll through the testimonials, everyone is so hyped about them. This is still my favorite testimonial. Every feature in Augment feels like it was built by people who actually ship software at scale. Speaking of scale, this is the Next.js code base. It has 1.6 million lines of code. It took so long to count the lines that I went and filmed a different ad while I was waiting, but Augment was able to index it totally fine. So this is Augment in a 1.6 million line of code base. Look at that. It's already generated some questions based on what it learned through the indexing. I'll ask it a fun one. How does the use server implementation differ between the file declaration and the function declaration? Remember, 1.6 million lines of code that it is using as part of its context to figure out what is actually going on. And it's already getting us an answer in 5 seconds. They actually have the balls to show a timer because it can handle things like this at this size. Like, how crazy is that? Here is the server boundary for use server that is hit when it's declared at the top of a file. But in a function, it's handled differently over in the server action.rs. Crazy that this is in the Rust code for that handler. But you can see all of the parts. You can click and go straight to the file that this is from, and it will highlight the code that's affected. You can't go through a giant code base with any of these other tools. If you're working in a code base like this, you owe it to yourself and to your coworkers to give Augment a shot today. Try them out now at soidev.link/augment. So let's dive in. We started with the intro, which is that React's one of the most commonly picked frameworks, not the most commonly, I guess. There's going to be one of those articles where they like shill WordPress. I'm going to go insane. But React is the most popular way to start new things today. That's not disputed. That's reality. So apparently there's 2 psychological traps that led to that. Pluralistic ignorance and false consensus effect. I'm going to be angry after this one, aren't I? What's pluralistic ignorance? Pluralistic ignorance happens when a group of people privately disagree with something, but go along with it anyway because they wrongly believe everyone else supports it. It's the no one believes it, but everyone thinks everyone believes it effect. Oh, so this is the delusion that you have, but you've convinced yourself everyone else thinks too. That's what this is. The silent majority is not as real a thing as you probably want to think it is. The majority opinion is spoken about quite a bit. But if all of the people who suck at writing code and are unsuccessful and running in circles on shitty code bases are the people you're talking about here, yeah, they probably quietly think that React sucks because they don't really think a whole lot. And the reason they don't say it isn't because they're scared because everyone else supports it. It's because everybody else knows better than them and they'll embarrass themselves when they say it, as the author's likely about to do. In the React ecosystem, this plays out when devs or decision makers sense that React is problematic. Maybe it's unnecessarily complex, slow, or convoluted, but they still recommend it. Why? Because they assume everyone else must know something that they don't. They fear being the odd one out. They don't want to challenge the safe choice, even if it's obviously flawed. Let's hear what these flaws are. Oh boy, this is how you end up with startups building MVPs that perform like shit and no one wants to admit it. I have some bad news. I have been auditing enough startups to call this absolute utter fucking bullshit. There is no startup that's product is slow because they picked fucking React. There's a lot of products that are slow because they're built on Rails or they're built on some weird architecture with serverless that takes forever to spin up because their binaries are too large, or they pick the wrong database that causes requests to take too long, or they're doing a ton of waterfalling on the client, requesting 15 things before the page loads, which you can do in every framework, by the way. There is nothing about React that causes a startup's website to be slow. There's a lot of things about writing software that cause that, and none of them are specific to or even relevant to React. If anything, because the React ecosystem is so well developed, there are solutions to all of these problems that don't exist in other places. So what's the false consensus effect? I thought we were going to get to actual problems, but let's see what the other psychological analysis you're doing on me as a professional developer is. Let's hear that. The false consensus effect is the tendency to overestimate how much others agree with your beliefs, values, or choices. Oh, you mean the thing you just did here, the no one believes it, but everyone believes it effect? The thing that you just literally did 3 paragraphs up. Is that what you're referring to with false consensus? I just want to be sure, Mr. Author, that I understand. My disclaimer should have put this earlier. Do not harass the author or anybody whose work comes up. If you harass this author for their work, you are doing a disservice to me, to the React community, and to all the awesome people hanging out making content with me. Let me take the fall for this. I am the asshole here. Be the good guy, not the asshole. Let me do this part. Don't cause problems. Don't make the rest of the community look bad. Let me be the dick. Anyways, in tech, this shows up when a dev sees their bubble of Hacker News, Reddit, or Twitter hyping React and assuming everyone's using React, so it must be the best. Let's do an experiment. According to this author, my bubble is going to be so into React, I'm going to get nothing but 10 out of 10 replies here. According to me, the guy who's often stuck defending React, I'll be surprised if the average is higher than a 6. We'll come back to this in a little bit once it has more replies. What's ignored is that everyone is often a vocal minority or tied to companies with different needs than yours. Facebook built internal tools for its own. Google, with Angular, and Vercel with Next, designed frameworks for their specific monetization needs. How is Next designed for Vercel's monetization needs? God, I wish I could interview these people sometimes. Like, I want it to be a conversation. I actually want to put somebody's feet to the fire and have them explain to me how Next is designed around Vercel's needs to make money. It's just these delusions, man. Your startup is not Facebook, and your customers are not looking for hydration strategies and route manifests. They just want your app to work. So here's the really fun thing. Do you think server components were added to React because Facebook needed them? Fun fact about the actual history of server components, they weren't made because Facebook needed them. They were made because Facebook already had their own equivalent solution to them with their crazy hack language that's built on top of PHP. It's a PHP-styled thing that compiles with C++. Hack's a hack. It's absolute fucking chaos. But hack is how their infra works. It's how they do their templating. It's how they do everything. And then React takes over once you get to the client. Why is all of this relevant? This is relevant because that's not what server components are. The way that data goes through a React app at Meta is very different from how it goes through one built with Next. The way it works at Meta is effectively every route has all of the queries it needs to make compiled at build time. So it goes through all the components that exist in a route tree, finds all of the GraphQL requests that all of those components will make, and combines them into a single request that occurs as soon as you start loading the page. That request goes to the backend and hack or whatever else, gets as much data as it can before it hits all the defers, and then passes that all down and then streams the rest when it's ready, the ones that you indicate can wait via those defer calls. The magic here is that you get this really nice pattern where you have a template that is useful on first load. You have one request that all of the data comes through with, and then the UI appears once the data is ready. Not the other way around. Not the component appears, fetches the data, shows a loading state until the data's in. This is why they built Relay. It's also why Relay is so hard to use, because you have to architect your entire framework code base and brain around this idea of combining all these fragments into a single query that will load all of your page's content. And this is a thing you have to bet everything on with your infrastructure to make it work, but it works incredibly well. It works so well that Facebook does not need server components at all. Server components are Facebook's attempt to take the benefits of everything I just described and bring those benefits to the rest of the world so that more of us can build cool things and get the same performance benefits that Facebook sees from this absolute chaos of infrastructure. There's a lot of reasons for this. It could be the fact that there's other projects at Facebook that want to hit that quality bar but don't have that good of a layer for the data. It could be that they have other businesses that they want to see find success, and they want the React ecosystem to keep growing, because the more successful React is and the more successful businesses are built on React, the more the ecosystem grows, the more that benefits Facebook. Or it could just be that they want their open source project to win. All of these things are why server components happened, and none of these things are Facebook's monetization needs being aligned with server components. They have lost so much money on that shit, it's hilarious. But they gave us a very generous gift because Google solves this problem their own way. The framework that we get from Google, Angular, doesn't provide any of this. And the idea of server-driven UI is not one that exists in the Angular framework at all. But Google needs that for a lot of products, including YouTube, including Gmail, including lots of other things. The idea that the server can tell the client how to make the UI look, regardless of the platform, is a very important thing that none of these companies have provided us the pieces to do. React took a bet on a different way of doing it that's really cool and powerful, and admittedly has edge cases. But man, there's a lot to dive into on this. I have a feeling I'm not going to agree with this author at all. It'd be cool if we do find something, though. Oh God. Let's say you're building a consumer-facing app and you pick React because it's the standard. A few months in, your app is sluggish, SEO is broken unless you wrap everything in Next, which adds complexity and server costs. Then you need hydration strategies, suspense, server components, client components, but none of these solve the core issue. Can you say why your app is sluggish? Why is the app sluggish? Is the app sluggish because you're waterfalling a bunch of data? You have a component that fetches data, and it mounts another component which fetches data, then has another component which fetches data? Because that's not React that's doing that. That's you that's doing that. And there's no solution that fixes this. I can't tell you how much awful Rails code I've read, where instead of using a join to select data that is relational, they just do like 5 separate calls to the database. And now every page load takes 10 to 20 seconds. But I don't hear you blaming Rails for that. Like, the other frameworks don't magically solve this. There's also the very real problem, and Ryan Carniato, the creator of Solid, which is, in my opinion, one of the biggest competitors to React and one of the few that offers meaningful performance wins, often talks about how bullshit this particular point is. Specifically that the second time you build it, it's always going to be better because you learned a bunch of lessons the first time. If you rewrite this again, also in React, it's probably going to do a lot better than it was the first time. So sure, my guess is that he went and rewrote something in some other shitty server-side framework like HTMX or like Flask or something, got better performance because he wrote it better the second time, and now is crediting the framework and not the fact that he wrote it twice. Probably where this is going. We'll see where we end up. None of these solve the core issue. React wasn't built for simplicity or speed. It wasn't well conceived, and even within Facebook itself, it faced a heated opposition and resistance from other engineers since day one. So if it was in this environment where people are pushing back on it constantly and it still won, were they all mentally ill too? Were you psychoanalyzing the smartest developers in the web space ever too? Or are you just going to skim over that part because you realize it destroys your entire argument? The worst part? Every React fix is a half solution to the previous complexity. It's a loop of patches, suspense, concurrent mode, server components, use, all solve problems that React introduced in the first place. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that loading data was a React-specific problem. I didn't realize that having non-blocking UI update code was a React-specific problem. I didn't realize rendering some parts on the server and some on the client was a React-specific problem. I certainly didn't realize composable state was a React-specific problem. I thought these were things that just exist when you build real applications. To each their own. Also, the fact that he doesn't mention the React compiler here, which is the one thing that could actually make his point a little bit, shows how little he understands the space. So what's the cost of the mistake? Time's your biggest expense as a founder. Choosing React can mean that you're building slower due to boilerplate and ecosystem sprawl, that you have poor runtime performance unless you heavily optimize, that you're constantly maintaining due to things breaking in fragile patterns, that your SEO and hydration issues require an entire tool chain to fix, that you're having difficulty hiring devs who actually know how to tame React rather than just copy-paste patterns or vibe code and hope. Do you think the developers that you're talking about here are going to be better at vanilla HTML than React? What the fuck are you on? What? Even worse, if you need to rewrite, which happens more often than people admit, you've wasted investor money and precious runway on tech debt. Remember, you'll eventually want to hit a Series A, at which point you'll get stuck rewriting your unusable app rather than rolling out features that your excited customers want on a daily basis. I was about to say, I need to see your suggestions because I I advise and have invested in over 100 early stage startups. And I shit you not, of the 4 that I know failed, 3 were Flutter. I've invested in 3 Flutter companies and all 3 already failed. So sure, React is why they're losing. Absolutely. You think all of the other ones aren't on React? I have not seen a company run out of money because they're stuck unfucking their React code base. And I have admittedly seen some very fucked React code bases at these companies. I have seen shit I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And none of it had anything to do with React. All of it was because of bad design decisions that were made. And Naman's hopping in. The common thing you'll see with all these articles, they never have an alternative they suggest, or they'll just suggest building a lame, mostly HTML app with less JS, which is a dishonest in a whole other way. I have a feeling that's where we're about to go here, because there are better alternatives. Depending on your needs, things like Lit, HTMX, Rimmel, and even vanilla plus web components offer blazing fast performance with cleaner, more viable, or just different mental models. They often require fewer or zero depths, less boilerplate, and they allow you to scale without rewriting your app every time the core team invents a new abstraction layer. I would love for you to describe to me in depth how an HTMX app scales to a team of 20 developers. I'm an HTMX defender. I have a lot of videos where I go in depth on how important I think HTMX is for the ecosystem. Because if you're a backend dev that doesn't like or want to learn web technologies, you shouldn't need something like React so that your page can show a new UI without refreshing. I will always defend the shit out of HTMX because it is such an important piece of this ecosystem. Because there are a lot of apps that don't need client-side interactions beyond letting new data come in and not refresh the whole page. HTMX is a really good solution for things that don't need heavy interaction, but need better than a page load on every time something changes. And I love it for that. I cannot fucking fathom how that would work at a team larger than like 5 people. If you have multiple people contributing at the same time to the same set of pages in the same application, which is apparently the goal here. This is how do you get to Series A? Series A doesn't mean your app is fast. Series A means that your app is useful to people and you need to hire more engineers to keep scaling up. If you're on React and you just raised your Series A, you now are hiring engineers to work in a system that scales up to larger teams. This is beginning to feel like a cope because this guy's startup failed and he's blaming the performance of his app instead of understanding that his app was useless. As he said earlier, the users don't care what framework you chose. And there are much smarter people than me in my chat saying that of these, Lit is viable, but it's not actually faster. And I agree there. Like Lit is super cool. It makes web components usable. Web components are entirely client-side. You can't server render them in any traditional sense. So you still have to wait and then run the client-side code and then fetch data like you would with anything else. It's just so much harder to do that you have to think about it more. And that's the difference. React is so easy that you don't have to think about these things, which results in people who don't think very much writing a lot of React code. Lit is so hard to make work that you have to be very careful about how you architect things, or those like failures in your system will become much more apparent much quicker. The difference here isn't that React is slow and bad and Lit is fast and good. It's that React is easy enough that you can write bad code in it and it will still work. Lit is so hard that you won't even be able to make the fucking page load if you do it wrong. But sure, your package JSON looks shorter. So I'm sure you feel really good about that. And I'm sure your users love you for lowering the package JSON size and taking way longer to ship features and not being able to hire engineers. And every time you hire an engineer, your app gets way buggier. They're not just technically better, but strategically better. Faster load times means better UX. Cleaner code bases mean much cheaper maintenance. Happier and more motivated devs mean faster iteration. And it's your product that benefits, not the Facebook ecosystem. I'm going to read the conclusion, and then I'm going to try to rebase this article for the author to make it actually useful and like find something to agree on, because they're not making it easy. If you're a tech founder, entrepreneur, or decision maker, try to escape your cognitive bias and don't just follow the herd. Avoid React, Angular, and copycats if you're building something lean, fast, and maintainable. These tools might be popular, but that won't make them the right choice automatically. Use your edge as a startup to stay nimble. Choose tech that solves problems, not tech that is a problem. Your users, your devs, and your investors will all thank you. I hated every minute of this. Cheskin Chat made a great suggestion. He used O4 Mini to show all the fallacies in this article and I had to copy and do the same. The result is longer than the original article, which says a lot. Unsubstantiated blanket claims, misapplication of psychological biases. It invokes pluralistic ignorance and then false consensus effect without any survey, interview, or hard data. Every React advocate secretly dislikes React. Also, these two contradict each other. He literally does false consensus in the pluralistic ignorance take. It's hilarious. Logical fallacies, including but not limited to straw man, hasty generalization, false dilemma. You get the idea. I would suggest to the author that you ask an AI why your article's wrong before you publish it. It might help you a lot. This author is falling for something that's even worse than the following the herd biases he's talking about. He is hating on the thing because it's popular and he's mad that it's popular. This is very common. I come from the music scene and I see this so much. You'd be amazed how many music lovers cannot admit the fact that Rihanna is an incredibly talented individual. They can't even bob their head to a Rihanna song because they're so deeply emotionally against the idea of something popular also being good. It's so common. I see people in chat already saying it. Pop is trash. Yeah, I was one of those people myself when I was 15. And then Justin Timberlake put out some incredible music and I had to get over my shit. The author of this article is making the same mistake I made when I was 15. Because there were some indie things that I thought were obviously really good, and there were some popular things that were obviously not good. All popular bad, all indie good. Easy trap to fall into if you're 15 years old. I don't know how the author managed to do it. So that part out of the way, I'm going to do my best to make an actual coherent point for the author. The thing that actually matters as an early stage founder trying to find PMF is ownership. Everything is yours. Every decision, every success, every failure, every conversation, every support email, it's yours. If you're starting a company and you're building a product for users, you have to own it. And that means a lot of different things. One of those is owning the tech, both the actual tech and the implementation, but also the process of the decisions and the failures and edge cases you'll hit there. You need to be invested in it. You need to care about it. I'm not saying that you need to be a huge React fanboy or anything. I'm saying you need to care about having these conversations and get a little bit nerdy with people who care a lot about them. You're already kind of like this because you're watching this video. That's the thing that matters most. And here's the harshest reality. And this is one that I don't like, that I have been coming around to myself. It's almost always better to use the tech that you want to use. Not because the tech you want is the right tech. Not because the tech you want is super good and going to be an edge that nobody else has. You need to be excited and you need to own your shit. This is the key. If using React makes you excited, use it. If using Solid makes you really hyped to contribute to your code base and make new features and do the things your users need, use that. If using HTMX lets you sit in the section you like the most, which is probably your backend in Go or Python or Rust or something, awesome, use that. Use the tech that makes you happiest and most excited to contribute in the code base. Because the harshest reality is that there is no early stage business that is meaningfully bottlenecked by their tech choices. And to be clear, I mean the frameworks they pick, the languages they pick. I've seen early stage companies find a ton of success and build totally usable things that their users love on tech I would never recommend. I've seen Rails companies find PMF super early, but I've also seen companies doing all the tech really right, using Bun where they need JavaScript, using Rust where they don't, going out of their way to squeeze every minuscule perf out that they can, and building with tech that they absolutely love deeply. And they forget about their users in the process and don't build anything useful. And I promise you, if you're building in Rust and I'm building in Python and we're both trying to compete in the same emerging market, the winner isn't the person who picked the right tech. No business won because their competition picked React and they picked Solid. No business won because their competition picked Python and they picked Rust. That's not fucking reality. That's not how you get through early stage. Early stage is about product market fit and survival. That's it. And if your product's already slow before you get to product market fit, that just means you suck at writing code. Just realistically speaking, there is no way you have a product that makes less than 10K a month. If React's specific performance issues are getting in your way before you have 20 engineers at your company, you suck really bad at writing software and need to delete the whole code base and restart because your product's not good either. There's no world in which that is not the case. You need to have enough taste to make something useful. And these conversations are a waste of your time until then. It doesn't matter how you start building. It matters that you're building and that you're solving real problems. And if you're lucky enough to get to the point where your tech decisions are slowing down iteration or are slowing down the actual product for users, awesome. You have users. That's why you care. That's a great reason to go fix your tech. But There is no world in which an early stage founder is losing because their app's too slow because they picked Rails instead of React or Solid or Lit or HTMX or something. Until you have an actual threshold of users where it's hard to keep up with your own community, your app should be small and nimble and easy to make changes in. If you're laying down heavy infrastructure that you're scared to rip up before you have PMF, you're a bad engineer. And you shouldn't be making tech decisions based on anything other than what's popular because your own intuition can't be trusted because you suck at your job. I will never tell an early stage founder what to use. I'll just tell them to use what they're familiar with. And if they run into specific problems, I will recommend other solutions that will help them with that. But it's additive solutions that help with specific problems. Build with what you know until you hit a certain threshold of success, and then fix the problems that you have as you go forward. So a different way of putting this, if you're an experienced Python dev and you want to build something, don't feel like you have to learn React first. You know me. I want to tell you all, just go build everything in React because that's kind of how I do things. It's made my life much better. But if you have tech that you're already familiar with and you have a product that you wish existed that doesn't, stop talking about your tech decisions. Go fucking build the thing. That's what I did when I built my stuff. And when I did this, I put together an absolute bastardization of Elixir plus GraphQL on the back end, and then a create React app fork with a ton of Webpack hacks and bullshit. Not a fork, but a component library I was building myself using styled components. And I tried to turn this into a template starter point back in 2019 when I was convinced all of this tech was the best option. I don't use anything listed here anymore because I switched all of the parts up as I realized they weren't solving problems and were causing more problems than they solved. And now when I build products, the products are much better because I know much more about what I'm using and I know the limitations of the bad choices I made in the past. No article is going to teach you that. If you're making your tech decisions based on a blog rather than your own experience, you're bad at your job. Making your tech decisions based on a YouTube video instead of your own experience, you're also probably bad at your job. You're making your tech decisions based on your experience, and then these other articles and videos and things give you insights on what else to try based on the problems that you have, or you're just excited about this thing and you want to go check it out yourself. Awesome. Follow your energy and excitement and solve the problems that you have. Don't take the random word of other people on the internet. If I was to write an article like this, it would be very different. Why you don't have to pick React for your startup. If this is a take I would absolutely agree with. The important thing for your startup is that you're setting yourself up to maintain your motivation through the hard parts. Making a startup sucks. You're going to fail so much. You're going to have to throw away so much stuff. You're going to make bad assumptions. You're going to burn customers. You're going to be lucky if you can even afford ramen at points. It sucks. Running a startup is not fun. You should pick the tech that makes you the most likely to get to the next step. And React is not the solution for that if you're not already a React developer. It's just hilarious to me that somebody sees that in certain benchmarks and circumstances, Solid.js is up to 1.8 times faster than React. Therefore, using React is a disaster. Fucking cycles on client are not why my app is slow. Data is why my app is slow. If I'm fetching too much data in order that makes no sense, then my app is slow. Every time I look at one of these slow React apps, the answer isn't in the performance tab or profiler. The answer is almost always in the fucking network tab. The network tab is the key that will answer most of the questions and concerns that you have about performance. And I honestly feel as though the people who write articles like this have just never opened it up before. So they think about the web as a single page being sent to the user, not as a back and forth between the browser and a server. And that back and forth is where React really shines. But it's also a problem that you can cause yourself if you're writing your React components the way you used to write templates, where you fetch the data as part of the template process, but now you're fetching it as a component. No, that doesn't work. I have 5 videos about this. I love this video, and I'm still disappointed it didn't perform better. My all the ways HTML gets to your browser video goes really deep on this and how to think about it. God, I used to look so much different. I am very happy I changed my appearance. The key points that I was trying to make here is the difference between multi-page apps and single-page apps and the different ways of rendering, where the user goes to a website in the browser, the server sends some HTML down, which includes a JavaScript tag. It fetches the JavaScript, parses it, and then hits an API endpoint to get the data that is needed to then render the UI. But different components need different data, and one component renders another component. You end up with a lot of these back and forths that you don't need. This video will be linked in the description. If you haven't already seen it and you don't understand what I'm talking about, watch it and you'll understand much better. There is no startup that is failing because at the earliest stage, the founders picked a technology that was too slow. There's a lot of businesses that are failing because the founders are digging their heels in on things that don't actually matter. There's a lot of businesses that fail because they don't meet the needs of their users. There are none that are failing because they picked the framework that is 50% slower than the other one. That's not how it works. You're falling for the trap of the... Funny enough, the whole point of this article is that React is built for Facebook's needs. Who do you think Lit is built for? Who do you think these other things are built for? Lit and the whole ecosystem around that, especially Marco, comes from eBay's need to compete like tooth and nail over e-commerce sales. How can you make the page load with content as fast as possible with as little other stuff as possible? How willing are you to spend way too much engineering time to micro-optimize load times for your site? That's what these tools are for, is for teams that are willing to slave over every single detail to make something slightly more performant because they are fighting at the craziest scales you've never seen before in order to be 5% faster than their competition, in order to increase their conversion by 1% and make another $5 million that year. If a 1% difference isn't $1 million problem for your business, shut the fuck up. Like, this isn't a conversation you're equipped to have. If you're a tech founder or entrepreneur at an early stage company and your framework is causing your app to be slow, I have a couple bridges to sell you. They're in really nice places and I'll give you a great deal. I think you're going to make it out really good on this. Seriously, though, I'm just increasingly tired of these takes. Build the thing that you want to build it with the stuff you want to build with, and stop making it everyone else's fucking problem. Just go ship stuff, especially if you're early stage. Your make or break isn't going to be one of these small niche benchmarks. None of this matters. Go ship. And let me know what you build, because that's a lot cooler than whatever the fuck we just read. Let me know what y'all think. And until next time, keep shipping.